Look at the weather.
It's beautiful here.
Non-stop rain.
Oh, man, it is a blazer out there.
It's cold and it's shivery.
It is cold.
Really coming down here.
I really enjoy your weather reports.
From the All Indiana Podcast Network, we're talking weather in a whole new way. From historical events to what's coming up, plus weather news, science, safety, fun facts, and more.
I like where this is going.
This is Weather Weekly. Weather Weekly with Wish TV Storm Track 8 meteorologist Marcus Bailey.
Hey, welcome back. Good to be with you here on Weather Weekly, episode number 28. I am meteorologist Marcus Bailey from Wish TV in Indianapolis. Good to be with you, as this will be the last podcast that we will drop in August. Now, I'll record this on the last day of August, but the next podcast, when we talk, you will be downloading on September 1st. Man, we are just flying along, and it's good to be with you here on episode number 28. This was going to be a good one here. And I cannot believe this crept up so quickly. But today, the day that I'm recording this, it is August 24th. It is 5 years to the day of really the last significant tornado outbreak that we've had here in the state of Indiana. And it was a big surprise one. Happened in 2016. Kokomo heavily impacted with an EF3. I'm going to have my colleague, Stephen Deanna, who at the time was at Ball State University. But I was here at Wish TV kind of covering that. And so we're going to combine forces here. He's going to kind of talk about the nuts and bolts of that day, and I'm going to tell you about how that day was. It was, with it being kind of a surprise outbreak day, it was one of the longest days in terms of coverage that I think I've ever had in my career. And I've had a couple of significant severe weather days, whether they be blizzards or tornadoes or severe weather in general. So we're going to talk about that. That's coming up after the break. I do want to get to weather headlines here briefly, and there are a lot of things that we can talk about here, and I don't want to spend too much time in headlines because I do want to spend a good amount of time on our subject matter coming up after the break. But after kind of a dull, let's say last month and a half, the tropics really ramped up, and we had three storms that were kind of making headlines around our area. We had Fred, we had Grace, and then we had Henri. Two of those storms made landfall in the United States, both as tropical storms. Fred did some damage along the Florida Gulf Coast as it made landfall. And then Henri made a rare landfall in New England, officially making landfall Monday afternoon in New Hampshire, I believe. So, yeah, you don't see that very often. Sustained winds of about 60 miles per hour. When that made landfall. And there was some coastal flooding, as was anticipated. Storm surge along the southern coast of Long Island was expected to be around 3 to 6 feet. On the northern shore of Long Island, it was forecasted to be around 6 to 9 feet. So some pretty high ones there. Pretty high rainfall numbers over about a 2-day stretch. And most of those were in New York or in New Jersey. It was actually around the greater New York City area. Haynes Falls, New York, almost 12 inches of rain, almost a foot of rain. Brooklyn, about 10 inches of rainfall. Sterling Forest, New York, same thing. Oakland, New Jersey, just over 9 inches of rainfall. And Cranberry, New Jersey, just under 9 inches of rainfall. So that did create some flooding issues. Grace also created some major problems. Grace is, I think, probably going to be more known for, even though it made landfall in Mexico twice, made landfall over the Yucatan Peninsula, and then again over mainland Mexico south of Texas, and did create some issues. But unfortunately, it ended up hitting Haiti as a tropical storm, and it wasn't a super strong storm, but it was when it hit. And that was just a few days after a 7.2 earthquake was epicenter just west of Port-au-Prince in Haiti. And it was just devastating. They're still trying to dig out from that. And obviously the tropical system of Grace did not aid in those efforts and only set things back a little bit. The other headline here, and again, this isn't local, but I mean, this was crazy that happened over the weekend. So there was some devastating downpours, catastrophic flooding in Tennessee. As of right now, and I'm reading a post by AccuWeather, 22 people unfortunately lost their lives over the weekend, and there are still dozens missing from some heavy rain that occurred with just a normal thunderstorm complex, but didn't really move a whole lot and just ended up dumping a lot of rain. So you're talking some areas that picked up. I'm just kind of looking through some of the stats there, some of the interviews that the AP were conducting. Now, this was just northwest of Nashville. That some of the floodwaters reached 7 feet inside of these buildings. And, it rained for several hours, but this wasn't over days and days and days and days of rain. This was over a very short amount of time. Down there. So that was very difficult to kind of see because that just happened all of a sudden. Where you're running into problems here, it looks like the Piney River in Vernon, Tennessee, crested at 31.8 feet. It shattered the previous record of by nearly 12 feet and towering 7 feet above major flood stage. So it kind of shows where the problems lie. I'm looking at a map here that we have for the 48-hour rain totals. And again, this was just west of Nashville, kind of between Waverly, Charlotte, Centerville. You have a bullseye of around 14 inches of rainfall. That's just an immense amount of rain in a very short amount of time. Even in a place that was extremely dry, that's just a lot of rain to pick up in a hurry. And so they're still dealing with that down in the central Tennessee area. So our thoughts are with them. But that's some pretty nasty stuff. You obviously still have the wildfires that are raging on out west. They're starting to get some of those under control, but we are in the heart of wildfire season out there as well. They're starting to get a little bit cooler out in the Pacific Northwest. Not great news because you're probably going to get more winds coming off the ocean. And so that could end up aiding and fanning the flames in areas that are extremely dry. They need rain. Some areas in the Pacific Northwest may get that. So we'll keep an eye on that. Just looking ahead real quick, there are 3 systems of interest in the Atlantic that have a possibility becoming named storms. One kind of maybe going along the same path as Grace, kind of starting to form now south of the Cuban island and could impact the Yucatan Peninsula and then sneak back into the Gulf of Mexico over the next 2 to 5 days. We'll keep an eye on that. There's a couple of others that are deep out in the Atlantic. None of these have any threat to the U.S. mainland as of right now, but we'll keep you updated as we get a little bit closer. Any headlines close to home? Not much. We've had one of our longer stretch of heat ongoing as we're recording this on a Tuesday. We're forecasting a 4th day in a row of 90-degree heat. Potentially could be the hottest day that we've had here in about 3 years. We're going with a high of 94, and Wednesday potentially could be hotter with a high of 95. Heat indices are going to be between 100 and 105, so it's going to be kind of a struggle here for the rest of the week. When it's all said and done, we could be stringing up to around 7 to 8 days in a row of 90-degree days. So that's going to be something worth watching. What's also worth watching is the lack of precip now. Time frame I set here that I'm looking at on my computer screen right now, July 17th to August 24th. We have not even picked up a half an inch of rain. And for that specific time frame, it is the driest on record by nearly almost a quarter of an inch. So we are running exceptionally dry over the last month and a half almost, and we're not going to see any real good significant signs of precipitation over the next 8 days. Of course, we'll have that full forecast looking ahead to the last week of August. That's coming up here at the very end of this episode 28. All right, coming up, my colleague and meteorologist Stephen Deanna. He joins me with some historical perspective. It is the 5-year anniversary of the August 24th surprise tornado outbreak that happened in central and northern Indiana. We'll have much more on that coming up next here on Weather Weekly. Welcome back, episode number 28, and this one will be a good one here. It's hard to believe that we're flying up on this anniversary because it doesn't seem like it's been 5 years ago, but my friend, my colleague that will be joining me here for the podcast, Stephen Deanna, reminded me that August 24th, 2016 would be 5-year anniversary of really kind of the you can correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen, kind of the last significant tornado outbreak I think we've had here in central and then specifically northern Indiana. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. But Stephen, thanks for coming back onto the podcast with me, bud.
Hey, thank you, Marcus. I'm glad to be back, man. Always great talking weather with you and with you guys too, especially for those who listen to this on a regular basis.
Right.
But yeah.
So you would have been, you would have been in college. You would have been at Ball State, right? When this happened?
I had just started my sophomore year, and quickly to answer your question too, I would say for Central Indiana, this was the last significant outbreak.
Right.
Northern Indiana had that significant tornado outbreak on Memorial Day 2019, where there were several strong tornadoes. Actually, one of my friends got hit by the EF3 up in Wells County.
That's right.
Thankfully, they were okay, but they had some very heavy damage up there. But yeah, this is kind of our last significant outbreak in Central Indiana. One that was not quite in the decks, basically, like saying, "Oh, this is going to happen." We'll break more on that throughout the podcast. But yeah, I had just started my sophomore year at Ball State, and Marcus, for you, as we talked about before, you were within your first 2 years at Wish TV8.
Right. So I had helped cover a couple of tornado warnings, I think, up to this point at Wish. Now I've had some pretty extensive coverages in my years in Peoria, but in terms of long form, hours of coverage, I had not done that yet here. But boy, did that change in a hurry. But just to kind of take it back and we can kind of talk about how that day went, because I think it'll coincide with just my attitude for the day, right? So This was a Wednesday, if I remember correctly. Yes. So it was Wednesday,
right in the middle of the week.
Right, Wednesday, August 24th, 2016. So back then, Wednesdays were my Fridays, okay? So my days off were Thursday, Friday. That was my weekend. And then I worked Saturday through Wednesday during the week. And usually, I believe at that time, I was covering Dayside because we did not have an full-time evening med at that point. We were in the process of hiring somebody. So it was me and, at the time, Ebony Dion, who was the other weekend meteorologist. She's currently at, I want to say, WSB in Atlanta right now. We were splitting time, and she would cover Wednesdays during the evening, so I was just more offering support and coming in and kind of doing the forecast. But I remember, before we kind of get into how my day was, and before Stephen, you kind of talk about how the whole setup was that day, I remember saying to Randy Allis, because I had just, he had just finished like his shift, and he asked me, he's like, "Do you think you need to come back?" Because at the time, if I remember correctly, we were only under a marginal risk. And it really didn't look that promising. I was looking at some of the models and the trends, and I'm like, meh, I don't think so. And I said to him, I was like, "You know what, Rand, I think we'll be okay. I think we'll be fine." I was like, and I just made the joke. I was like, "This is going to be an easy Friday for me, buddy." I was like, "I'm going to get out of here early." I was like, "I'm going to get all of Ebony's blog stuff done, and I'm going to scoot out of here." And he's like, "Okay, well, let me know." He's like, "I'll be around." But I was like, "Nope, easy Friday. Marginal risk for severe weather. And that was like probably at around noon. Now, things didn't start getting real hairy until about, if I remember correctly, 3:00 in the afternoon. But that was kind of like when we first got the severe thunderstorm warning. And then that quickly turned to a tornado warning, which I'll talk about in a second because there's a funny story that goes along with that. But before I get too deep, Stephen, and talk about kind of how that day played out for me as a television meteorologist, kind of walk us through I mentioned that we did go under, I think it was a marginal risk, at least here in central Indiana. How was this whole thing kind of forecasted, and then how did it end up playing out?
Yeah, to your point, Marcus, you weren't the only one basically thinking, it's not going to be like a huge thing.
Right.
Because the Storm Prediction Center, of course, they weren't really forecasting anything along the lines of an outbreak. They were just like, it could be isolated severe storms. I think we were under a low wind tornado threat up to that point, like the 2%, the lowest of the low. But nothing like, we're going to have like this many tornadoes and stuff like that. It was a cloudy, muggy Wednesday, as I recall it. And I wasn't thinking anything tornado related. I don't know if I remember seeing us being under a severe threat. I was just trying to get through the first week of college, first week of the school year.
Understood.
Of course, that's as all the other students are.
Right.
But what ended up happening was you had a load, and I mean a load of moisture at the low levels. We're talking dew points that were approaching the lower 70s, which is just absurd. Once you get to that point, you feel miserable out there. But that really helps in aiding in storm development and getting unstable air. What we also had was a load of winds aloft. Wind shear is the change in wind speed and direction with height. And we had quite a bit of that. I believe what it actually was is what's known as an MCV, or mesoconvective vortex. In simple terms, that adds extra spin to the atmosphere. It comes off of a complex system, basically, and it kind of evolves into some sort of spin in the atmosphere. And it can add rotation overall, which can heighten the danger. And then, of course, we had a cold front coming as well, which basically provided the trigger for storms. You got to have some kind of trigger point, whether it be a front or an outflow boundary in general. And so with these ingredients coming together and an upper level disturbance, it seemed like everything kind of kicked off at the right time, like literally. Like you said, Marcus, things got pretty hairy starting just before 3 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time, when the cloud, even with the cloud cover in place, you had enough unstable air from the dew points being really high. It was basically your case of, and that's how it usually is here, high shear, low cave. But the cave values were actually going up to decent amounts, actually. This wasn't just a low cave event. This ended up actually becoming, that's why we had all the tornadoes we had, because the cave values were starting to actually go like in the 2,000, 3,000 range. That's when we're thinking, that's when you're like, okay, we got some moderate cave energy values, basically. And I say cave, it's just available energy in the atmosphere for storms to be able to tap in, for parts of the tap into for storms to grow. So basically, by 2:30, 3 o'clock, I had just got to Intro GIS with Dr. Zimmerman, the great Dr. Zimmerman. I remember you talking about
Intro to GIS, baby. Man, I love that class. That class was great. Little ArcGIS with you. You got that book. That was some good stuff.
Yeah. That class was quite unique in advanced GIS. I had Dr. Berlin. I don't think Berlin was, think Berlin was there. He's definitely a younger professor, but he's cool. He's very smart as well. But I was in that class from 2 to 3:15. I had just gotten done with Com 210 and stats. I had stats with Dr. Coleman that year. But basically, I'm sorry, Dr. Zimmerman, I wanted to surf the web real quick. We were in a room of computers. I was still listening. I just wanted to kind of stay awake. I think if I recall, I was a little tired that day, but I just so happened to go on Weather Underground. I don't want to say RIP Weather Underground, but it's like nobody really goes to that site anymore. Like for us weather nerds, that was where we really went to quite a bit, especially for me when I was younger. So I went there, and it said tornado warning for Crawfordsville. I thought, okay, tornado warning for Crawfordsville. Clicked on it. It said confirmed tornado. I thought, okay, didn't think much of it. But then, that was a sign of things to come. Of course, nobody really realized it at the time, but that's when things started kind of spinning off really quickly. And, of course, a few markets, as you said, of course, things got out of control. So here we are at 3 p.m. I just got out of class at 3:15, and I'm trying to hustle back to my room. I'm thinking, okay, I want to figure out what's going on. that's when everything changed. I remember distinctly it was like about 3:30. I got back to my room. It was about a 10-minute walk. I lived at Stu West, so I had a good 10-minute walk, but I'm a fast walker, so I make up for the most of the time basically getting back to there. But I will never forget this. I go back on Weather Underground, and there's a tornado emergency for Kokomo, and I felt like I was turning pale at that point. I thought, oh no, this is bad. I'm like, wow. And the hook was nasty too. So I'll kind of hand it over to you, Marcus, back to you with continuing your story. So At this point, you got the Kokomo tornado coming in. What's the situation at Wish? What's going on? And yeah, go ahead and take us through.
Let me take you back to where you started with the Crawfordsville tornado. So what we end up doing, and we still do this is part of the format, is weather takes over the 3:00 news break, right? So at 3:00, top of the hour, we do kind of a 30-second cut in. Even on quiet weather days, we'll just show like a few cameras, we'll show temperatures, and it's a tease ahead to here's the forecast of 5 and 6. So as we're getting ready to do that, Ebony is getting ready. So I let her know. I'm like, I'll take care of the 3:00. And I get the text that there's a severe thunderstorm warning. So I tell our director that's getting ready to get us on, I was like, hey, I'm going to go a little bit longer. Just leave it open-ended, though. And he's like, okay. And literally, I want to say when he gave me the 30-second cue that we were going to go on air, the severe thunderstorm warning then changed to a tornado warning for Montgomery County. So that's Crawfordsville. And
right on time. Right.
I mean, it really was, right? Because I didn't have to do it like right in the middle. But I was just like, all right, heads up, I'm going to be staying with this. So just stay with me until this. I was like, just giving you a heads up, there's a tornado warning. So I sent a quick text message to the newsroom. I was like, hey, going on for a tornado warning, just FYI. Because obviously I don't have time to run down and do that. I didn't have time to text Ebony, who's in the makeup room getting ready. So she ends up walking in about 5 minutes after I've already been on. And she's like, what is going on? Like, she just kind of gave me this look like, what in the world? But the thing about that is, and you mentioned it, that was the beginning of a long day, which I did not anticipate. Because I think my even famous last words I said to our director, John O'Connor, who was running that cut-in at that time, I said, I shouldn't be on long for this. What ended up not being long ended up being we went on at 3:00, and I don't think we signed off the air until the 11:00 news was over. So we were on in some capacity basically from 3 p.m. all the way until 11:30 that night. So it did make for a long day, but obviously the highlight of that was it came early, and it was with the tornado that originally started in Crawfordsville, which ended up, I think like 30 homes ended up getting damaged from that one. And then obviously the headliner was what happened in Kokomo. And I think everybody remembers when you think about that day, the image that sticks out in your mind is the Starbucks getting destroyed on the south end of Kokomo, right? That's what kind of stood out. Now, there was a lot more damage than just that. There were several neighborhoods that were destroyed on the south end. I believe it was somewhere around 1,000. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm trying to think of this off the top of my head.
You are correct.
Okay. There were some that had major damage, but the thing that I remember about that day was we actually lucked out for coverage, because on any given day, we're not going to have a reporter up in Kokomo. That's an hour drive from Indianapolis. But what was unique about that day, if you remember, is we were covering the death of Brian Clausen. Brian Clausen was the short track driver, mainly raced dirt tracks, but he had also raced IndyCar as well. And he had unfortunately passed away in an incident on dirt track, I think maybe a week or two prior to this happening. And so a lot of IndyCar drivers, a lot of just the racing community in general was going to be coming up to the dirt track up in Kokomo to do a big fundraising event for the Clausen family. and for Brian Clausen's cause, which was to that he was an organ donor, right? So, and now they basically made that into what's called the BC 139 that they do at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I think they've done it now 3 years or 4 years in a row now. They do it kind of surrounding what formerly known was Brickyard 400 weekend. Anyway. So we luck out in the sense that we are covering that both on a sports coverage perspective and a news perspective, because it was kind of the newest. It was the first year that they were going to do like this fundraising event. And so we lucked out that was going on. So we had a reporter. His name was Tim McNicholas. He's up at Chicago, CBS Chicago now. But he was up in Kokomo. And we also happened to have a pretty close relationship at the time with Connor Daly. Connor Daly was racing in that event. And so some of the first photos that we had of that Starbucks came ironically from Connor. And
wow.
Yeah, so we knew that, and you mentioned the hook that was going through Kokomo that day. We knew that something was pretty bad, but obviously we're far away, from Indianapolis. That's a 50-mile drive up to 40 to 50 miles, 50 miles probably from downtown. Right. So we don't know exactly what's going on unless we start seeing photos coming in. Our photographer and well, actually, I don't even know if we had a photographer. I think Tim may have been one man banding that. So Tim was trying to race to get to the south end of Kokomo because if I remember correctly, I could be wrong about this, but if I remember correctly, the dirt track that they were racing on was on the north end of Kokomo. So it was going to take some time to get down there to cover some of that coverage because the damage path was basically on the south side of Kokomo. Anyway, we were able to get a phoner with Connor. He was talking about what he was seeing. It was just unbelievable damage. It happened quickly. So, yeah, but I mean, just to kind of summarize how that all unfolded, we end up lucking out immensely because we actually ended up having bodies at the scene to cover that, where in many cases that far out, it would have taken us over an hour to actually get there. We were able to be there to show the damage initially just minutes after it happened, but we were also able to get a camera crew on scene as emergency personnel were starting to give updates, which was key because obviously there was a lot of the town that was kind of destroyed. So we were able to get, I believe the Howard County Sheriff did a lot of those updates that day. And so we were able to get him live on the air before a lot of other people could because we were actually covering the event that day.
Wow, that's incredible. And I think that's really key there too with having people already there at the scene because of course it's critical information that people are wanting to know. It's like you just had a tornado hit a higher populated area, and just real quick, I wanted to know too, this was the strongest tornado to hit Kokomo since the Palm Sunday 1965 outbreak when a violent F4 tornado actually destroyed part of Rushville as well. And it's incredible though, because of course there's a lot of people thinking, "Oh my goodness," and then you see the Starbucks. I remember seeing the Starbucks. I thought to myself, "Oh geez, I hope people got to safety. That just looks bad." Those were some of my first words. Well,
and and to your point, I think considering the devastation that tornado did, that was an EF3 tornado, and that. It ended up not really, as far as I know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but at least from what I remember and looking at some of the older reports, any injuries were actually very minor. I don't remember there being significant injuries. I don't remember there being fatalities from that day, which I think is remarkable, right? Because there was, I hate using the term, there was no warning, right? I mean, you hear journalists use that a lot, and it is my biggest pet peeve. Now, there was a warning, right? They had a good warning on this cell. I mean, it dates back to Crawfordsville. But in terms of if you watched the news that morning, did you anticipate that there was going to be a tornado rolling through Kokomo? Probably not. All of our wording that morning was probably very, there is a chance, but I don't expect widespread, severe, something along those lines. So consider thinking about that and thinking that it went through kind of shopping areas, with that Starbucks there, neighborhoods, which with it happening when it did, I want to say that would have been probably around the 4 o'clock time frame, probably. You don't have a lot of people that are home at that point because people are still at work. You had a lot of houses that were destroyed, but you do have kids coming home from school. So again, I think man, did we luck out that we didn't have any more significant injuries or worse when that tornado went through Kokomo specifically, because out of all of the tornadoes, at least that we cover, I know there were some strong ones up in northern Indiana, and we can talk about those, but I don't, obviously we didn't cover those because we were just focusing on central Indiana. That Kokomo tornado was by far the one that we covered. That was the strongest one of the day. And to come out of that with pretty much minor injuries was definitely a blessing.
Yeah, it is a blessing. That's the one thing that always stands out for me for this outbreak was the fact there were no fatalities and only a few injuries, despite the fact of all this coming on so fast and how so strong some of these tornadoes were. And we'll discuss the other stronger tornado. The other one was probably the strongest one in terms of wind speed, I would probably say, but neither here, near, or there. I mean, we had significant activity for several hours, and of course it went into Northwest Ohio, but yeah, and a lot of it, too, I think, is with people listening to the warning and the lead times, too. And I'll break down some of those details towards the latter portion of the podcast once we kind of, do, a reflection and whatnot.
Right.
And there's a good follow-up on this on the NWS Northern Indiana's website as well, which I'm going to base it off of as well with some of their statistics, because their area was also heavily affected as well. So we get to about 4 o'clock, actually, and of course, I'm just starting to get my blood pressure's rising quite a bit, actually, with the Kokomo stuff. I had a friend who I texted, and I said, "Hey, man, please contact your family. There's a large tornado moving through Kokomo," and I was afraid for the worst. I'm thinking, man, these people don't need this. But what I didn't notice immediately was there was a tornado warning issued for the metro. So Indianapolis was actually under the gun at 1.2, about 4 o'clock, and I have some of the messages from that day from my dad. So I texted him, and this is really cool. I was able to go back on my old phone, thankfully. That thing, it almost feels obsolete when you work it, but thankfully I was able to go back. And I'll tell you what, I had the iPhone 5C for years, and now I'm at the 11. But
nice.
Fun fact, yeah, it is nice. But I'm so glad I was able to go back and do this. It's more of just getting on a relatable note with you guys too. Sure. So I texted him at 3 till 4 p.m. You better get to the basement soon. Possibly Marion County is now totally under a tornado warning. I remember turning on some coverage myself in my dorm room. I was in Stu West at this point in my room. And I was locked into the TV from that moment on for a while. So I'm watching it. It's getting pretty dark down at home. Muncie's got nothing going on. Muncie, at that time, we had some partly sunny skies. It was in the lower 80s, I want to say. It was windy. It was very windy that day. 20 minutes later, I texted him saying, IMPD is reporting a possible tornado at 21st and North Ritter. So that's right there by I-70 on the near east side, so just east of downtown. And then, oh man, this is where it got personal for me, actually. So I didn't immediately notice this. I'm checking the warning, and of course it's scrolling to the bottom too with the details. I'm just kind of looking through the details. It's still, at this point, I want to keep this in mind. Up to this point, it was radar indicated.
Right.
No tornado yet. I will never forget this moment. My heart dropped at this point. This is when I started freaking out a little bit. So at 4:19, the warning updated, and I didn't see this actually for a couple minutes. I'm still, of course, kind of watching the TV and whatnot. And this is I screenshotted the warning and sent it to my dad. So this is what the warning said, basically. A tornado warning remains in effect until 4:45 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time for northwestern Hancock and northern Marion counties. At 4:19, a confirmed large and extremely dangerous tornado was located over Indianapolis, moving east at 20 miles per hour.
I remember that.
This is a particularly dangerous situation. Hazard damaging tornado source, law enforcement confirmed tornado. As soon as I sent that image, I sent question mark, exclamation mark, question mark, exclamation mark. I'm freaking out now at this point. Yeah, and I'm not too far from this area. I'm not too far from it, and I'm seeing this hook drop south. I thought, all right, you know what? We're not doing this today. I'm an hour away from home, and I'm thinking to myself, good Lord, don't tell me that there's the possibility in the next few minutes that I can end up losing everything.
Sure.
And considering what just happened in Kokomo, I'm getting scared. I'm not going to lie. I'm just going to say it right now, this was probably the last time I was legitimately scared about a tornado warning for some portion of central Indiana, like for my area specifically. It just... Everything started, I think everything started going at 1,000 miles per hour in my head. I'm thinking, oh, dear God, this is not going to happen when I'm not at home. Like, why is this happening when I'm not at home?
Right.
And you feel helpless at that point. I ended up putting a post on Facebook. I thought, we got a confirmed large tornado in the east side. I'm like, this is a nightmare pretty much. I don't know what to do anymore. I was shaking. I was. Thankfully, it wasn't large and dangerous. It was an EF0. It lasted for like a minute.
Right.
But it's like, goodness. It's like, I know so many people on the east side. I have a lot of connections, especially there. That's where I went to school at and stuff. It's like, man, we really got lucky.
And you understand why they say that, because you're in the most populated city in the state. You want some pretty strong wording. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know if, when you use that, and I think they've probably kind of, tried to clean some of this wording up. I don't know if you want to use large and dangerous tornado. I know it was on the ground briefly. And so you've got officials. What I remember with that, Stephen, was obviously I didn't get a good look because I was inside the studio, but somebody had mentioned, and I think we actually took a camera out to our front porch, which those of you that do not know, we're on the corner of 20th and Meridian, just north of downtown. And somebody took a camera out our front porch, and I believe we saw the beginnings of that tornado you were speaking of, because we, on live television, I was covering, there were several other warnings that were going on, but I remember the producer getting my ear saying, hey, toss out to Bennett, who was one of our reporters at the time, and he was out on that front porch with the camera crew, and they're like, toss out to Bennett, he's got some rotation. And I'm like, where is he? And they're like, he's out front. I'm like, oh. I was like, all right, let's go outside. We're going to our front porch. Bennett Haverly is out there. Bennett, what do you see? And he shows this, and it was clear as day rotating. It was a wall cloud that was rotating right over us. And then eventually started moving to the east. But I believe that was what obviously that's where the tornado kind of stemmed from, and then started moving east, and then ended up dropping east of us here over from downtown Indianapolis. But I do remember that one distinctly. And I remember seeing the rotation couplet on radar too. And I was like, gee, mini Christmas, this is crazy.
It is.
Yeah, go ahead, Stephen.
Oh, you're good. I wanted to also mention too, it touched down in the Brightwood neighborhood. The area is not too far from Cardinal Ritter High School. I ran there for a cross-country meet, so I kind of know the area a little bit.
Ritter's on the west side, right? Like out by the Speedway?
Ritter? No, east side, actually.
Oh, Cardinals. Oh, that's right. Okay.
Just on the east side, not too far from downtown. Right around that area. Not too far from Cardinal Ritter High School, just to kind of get you guys was very straight with vocation and whatnot.
Gotcha.
But yeah, briefly touched on Brightwood neighborhood, snapping numerous tree limbs. It was 100 yards wide, wasn't large, but like you said about the warning and whatnot, and given the fact you're in the most populous county in the state,
right?
thankfully, it wasn't much worse. Like you said, the hook, good Lord, that thing was,
Yes.
it was like classic as day. And you see this stuff in the plains. You don't get supercells like that here in Indiana like that. You would need a higher end setup for this to happen. But go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say, and I was just going to kind of move forward here with this, and the one thing, and I'll let you kind of carry on about how the rest of the day played out, because like I said, you will have more information on some of the northern Indiana tornadoes, which they were pretty nasty up in northern Indiana. But
yes,
really the rest of the day, we had several tornadoes, or what I should say, we had several tornado warnings. But the one that happened in Kokomo was the most significant. But here's what I remember about that day distinctly, Stephen, and I think I even said it on the air. It was long enough when you have that EF3 that goes through Kokomo, in addition to the damage that happened in Crawfordsville. But then you throw the EF0 in Indianapolis, that's making for a long day. But that was literally just the beginning of the day. And what I remember saying on air, we'd already had the tornado warning in Indianapolis. We'd already had the tornado damage in Kokomo and Crawfordsville. And what just ended up happening was it just seemed like there was a tornado warning, one after another, after another, after another. And what I said on air, I was like, I've never seen these like storm after storm after storm after storm, almost just as soon as they form, start spinning. And it's like every time, we have the rule, as long as there's a tornado warning, we're going to stay on the air. And it would look like we would come to the end of our coverage, because a tornado warning was set to expire. Another storm fired probably in the last couple of minutes of that warning, and it's sure enough, they let the initial tornado warning expire, and they'd have to fire up a new one for this new storm that developed that was really close to it, and it's now spinning like a top. And I had never seen anything like that on a lower end risk day. Everything was spinning like a top for most of the storms, with the exception of the Kokomo tornado, at least locally for us. None of them really got going to be strong enough to be considered a major tornado type of storm. But that's what I remember. And it just never stopped until about 9:30, 10 o'clock. It finally stopped, and we finally could go and say, okay, we're done covering this. We're going to send it over to the news, because we have been talking literally for like 7 or 8 hours straight. So, but it just did not stop. We were on almost for 8 hours. Now, vast majority of those storms, especially as we got later in the evening, I don't think really produced anything significant. There may have been some quick little EF0s that were briefly on the ground, but from my recollection, most of those were pretty quiet and may have just done a brief touchdown type of thing. What I do remember is I remember there being at least 2 or 3 tornado warnings over the same area where that EF3 tornado hit in Howard County in Kokomo. And I just kept apologizing. I'm like, guys, I'm sorry. I know you've already dealt with one of these, but you've got another, and then you've got another, and now you've got another. So those were kind of distinct memories in my mind, that it was just nonstop in terms of coverage that day.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, too, that's the crazy thing. This is one thing I forgot about. Howard County was like under the gun several times that day, whether it be Kokomo or was. Here's the thing. I'll kind of quickly go through this part real quick just so we can move on to the other stuff. So I texted my dad roughly an hour later. Oh, God, Kokomo is probably about to take another hit from an oncoming tornadic storm. And my dad said, so are we. And I remember that, too, because there was another one behind it. I thought, all right, here we go again, another stroke time or whatnot.
Right.
It was just, everything was just spiraling out of control. My head's spinning at this point. I go, I know, it looks to be passing to your north, so you should be good. He said, well, that's cool. Thank you. I said, no problem. Then I text back almost immediately. Oh, there's a confirmed large and dangerous tornado west-northwest of Kokomo. Hopefully it stays just north of Kokomo and passing by. And I think this was the EF1 that was on the ground for actually 17 miles. So this was on the north side pretty much of Kokomo, starting near Flora. it started in Carroll County, and it kind of went towards the north side of Kokomo. So Kokomo's just getting hit left and right. It's like these people have had enough. They just had an EF3 blow down a Starbucks and destroy many parts of neighborhoods. It's like, oh my goodness. And then you had another one happen near Indian Heights. It was a brief tornado. Then you had one south of Rocheville. Then you had one south of Kokomo near the area where the first one happened.
Right.
It's like, how many times are we going to go through this? And that's just a person's worst nightmare in severe weather like that. It kind of reminds me of the super outbreak of 2011. Marshall County, Alabama had like 14 tornadoes that day. It was ridiculous. It's a record for a number of tornadoes in a county in Alabama state history, which reminds me of that. It's just like, gosh, we cannot go through this again. It's like you sit in your shelter for like 30, 45 minutes one moment, and then like, oh, we're going to be down here much longer. Oh, we're going to be down here much longer. It's like, but thankfully, though, again, no fatalities, and you only escape with a few injuries after all that damage. It's incredible. But, yeah, basically, after I texted my dad that, he said, yeah, really? I said, yes, it's not a good situation. It's turning dire very quickly. He said, you just stay safe. I said, I am. And that's when I went on my run. I had to go run still that day. I ran around the same time that the Woodburn, Indiana tornado started kicking up, or just shortly afterwards. So we'll move on to that tornado next real quick. And this was a high-end EF3. This was almost an EF4, actually. And you don't get violent tornadoes in August often. It doesn't happen too often. And this actually started just east of Fort Wayne. You know what? Actually, I'm just now seeing this here, too, in the information. I just glanced over to the last sentence of this. Surveyors noted that the extreme vehicle and machinery damage suggests possible EF4 intensity that it caused. It was on the ground for 5 miles, but it was quite a powerful tornado, multi-vortex tornado, which multi-vortex tornadoes that could produce some of the strongest winds overall and some of those violent tornadoes. Of course, she had like large, well-constructed barns completely obliterated, 2 combines thrown and mangled, a dump truck from the same location thrown, just all kinds of damage just east of Fort Wayne. Could you imagine that tornado would have touched down in Fort Wayne? That would have been catastrophic.
Yes.
That was close. It was very close. And my good friend, Nathan Gidley, who interned at Wish TV, of course, with you, Marcus and Randy and all those guys, great stuff, of course. He was telling me, yeah, it was very close to my place, and I was like, oh my goodness, that's because I've had in my lifetime, I've had an F4 touchdown 3 miles east of my house. That was back in '98. That was the last time we had a violent tornado in central Indiana overall, 23 years ago. And I only fear about that day to come sooner and sooner, because it's like, it's not a matter of if it's gonna happen. It's a matter of just when. But,
that's right. Yep.
Yeah. And so, so we had more activity to the north. So basically, 5:30 and onward, you had the activity push into Ohio. You had strong tornadoes near the communities of like Defiance, Ohio. You had actually a strong tornado in Windsor, Ontario. So Ontario got on some of the action. It wasn't just Indiana, Ohio. You had, and a lot, like you said too, Marcus, too, there was actually quite a bit of weaker tornadoes too, like near Van Wert, Napoleon, LaSalle, Ohio. LaSalle, Ontario. Correction on that, my bad. On that, you had, of course, a weak tornado in Peru and Miami County, Indiana. But yeah, you had another strong tornado in Ohio near the community of Antwerp to March Center. And a lot of these tornadoes didn't last very long, but of course, they're on the ground long enough to cause damage. Any tornado can cause damage. That's why tornadoes are dangerous, no matter what the rating is. Because, I mean, besides, every tornado is pretty much different in that sense. But yeah, you had quite a bit of activity going on through the day. My mind kind of shut off at that point. I wasn't paying attention to it anymore because things were kind of dying down in our area. All the things were going off in Northwest Ohio. So did my run. It was breezy and real humid. It was, very, very humid that day. But I grabbed dinner pretty late, and it was about 9:15. I was in a friend's room. I wasn't in my room at this point. And I noticed there was a tornado warning near the community of Alexandria, which is just northwest of Muncie. There's a cell moving southeast. Yep. And it's coming straight for us. I'm thinking, oh, great. We're about to be under the gun. You can't have a party without Muncie not being involved.
That's right, baby.
Yeah, Ball State, let's go. Oh, God, not that kind of fun party, folks. Oh, my goodness. No one was chirping at, like, what was it, 9:20 when we got under a tornado warning.
Okay.
I remember, too, I'm just thinking, well, I was calmed down at this point. I had simmered down quite a bit, too. I just wanted to put that out there as well. So I was pretty much, for the most part, okay. I calmed my overall emotions down and stuff like that after earlier events. But we went downstairs, and the storm looked okay. It was weaker rotation, was still enough to warrant the tornado warning. And as soon as we get to the first floor, because I was on the 8th floor, Stu was. There's 9 floors overall, and I was on the 8th one. So, of course, walking down a flight of stairs and get to the first floor, I'm on the phone with my dad. Mm-hmm. And we did this every time I was under a tornado warning at Ball State. I talked to my dad on the phone. I'd be like, hey, what are they saying? As soon as I get to the first floor, they're already saying the storm's weakening. I thought, cool. So we just went down to the first floor. Well, not for nothing, obviously.
Right.
But we weren't down. The warning was until 9:45, and I think they ended up canceling it early because, of course, the storm weakened. Thankfully, it was like we dodged a bullet. We actually ended up dodging a bullet earlier that year, too, on May 1st. We had a tornado warning that night, and nothing happened. That was actually much later than that, like 11 o'clock, but that's neither here nor there. Overall, Marcus, there were 24 tornadoes that day, 24.
Okay.
On a day that that wasn't forecasted on the dot, like at that moment to be like that. It's, of course, this was an unusual outbreak for multiple reasons. Of course, one being largely unexpected. They actually upgraded to a slight risk, the level 2 out of 5 in Indiana by the time everything was going off. Of course, they upgraded the tornado threat a little bit as well. And tornado outbreaks of this size and intensity are also not commonly seen during the late summer months across the Ohio Valley region. That's not to say we can't get severe weather. It's more or less usually during August, you think more severe thunderstorms.
Right.
Of course, you get the daytime heating especially as well. Despite the damage, few injuries, and again, no fatalities occurred. I know we mentioned that point a few times, but that's like the Easter egg of this whole thing.
Yes.
Like we walked away with everyone still intact at the end of the day. So I thought that was incredible, to say the least. Now here's some interesting stats, Marcus.
Okay.
With especially from the northern Indiana site overall. So basically, the highest rated tornado there were 2 EF3s, of course, but the Woodburn tornado was the strongest that day in terms of what it was able to do overall with the damage. Basically, they issued 26 tornado warnings during the event. The average lead time was 16 minutes, actually.
That's pretty good.
That is pretty good, especially on a day that you're not talking tornadoes like this
right.
in a sequence. Probability of detection 100%. But yeah, an interesting thing too here, this little section, I haven't gone on this site yet to read this information. I figured I'd go ahead and share this with you as well. Working together to save lives. The tornado outbreak on August 24, 2016 was a great testimony to how strong partner and public relationships save lives during active weather. You had 14 tornadoes in the IWX forecast area. Amazingly, no fatalities. I'm sorry to keep saying that.
No, I mean, it is. You're right. To hammer that home, because that was, look, like you said, it's the last outbreak that we've had. And
right.
It was unexpected. It was unexpected, not just by the general population, but by meteorologists. Even some of the best of the best. It just caught a lot of people off guard. And so if you can walk away with some pretty big tornadoes and no fatalities, that's a pretty good, we'll take that every time, for sure.
And I would, absolutely. I wish we can take that every time. Like, for example, I'll use this as a quick example. The 2 high risks we had in March 17th, it didn't blow up to what it was supposed to be, even though there was very strong tornadoes, no fatalities. And then March 25th, it was much worse. But then again, that's what's the scary thing about that day was that could have been even worse. And we had multiple EF3s. We even had the EF4. We had 6 fatalities from that day overall. And it's like, you wish it was you wish it was basically everyone walks away unscathed every time. And unfortunately, it doesn't happen like that all the time.
Right.
But overall communication between emergency managers, trained spotters, media personnel, the public, and the National Weather Service was crucial to preventing the loss of life. Getting that message out there. That's one of the reasons why I love this business. I've talked about it before on here, the evolution of this business, how we're able to better put out the message, communicate, get that information out there. Going back to having on the scene personnel, it was kind of like I don't know what word to use for that. Basically, it was good to have those people there to be able to relay those reports, because there's a lot of people that are like, oh my goodness, is my loved one okay, and whatnot. And it's so important to be able to get the information out there when you get it and how do you get it. And that's one of the reasons why that I love this business. And saving lives, I think it's incredible. Timely, or where was I at? Okay, here. And the National Weather Service was crucial for preventing loss of life. Okay, that was where I left off that. Timely and accurate reports sent into IWX during the event helped us to make more effective warning decisions. Arguably, the same can be said with the Indy area as well. Reports, videos, and pictures quickly sent to us after the event helped us to identify where to start surveying the damage. Again, same can be said with us too, because of course you had, Connor Daly, for instance, being there with the Starbucks, and just having that information is so vital with knowing, okay, what's going on, where's it at, what do we need to do. And I think it's incredible with how everyone kind of came together on a day that surprised us all. And I don't want to say it'll happen, it won't ever happen again, because you always want to keep your guard up. This is an event where it's so important to say, this is why you always keep your guard up, even if there's a low-end risk. I've seen way much more happen on a low-end risk, Marcus, than you. I know you can say the same yourself, because we've seen so much more happen when the risk level is a level 1 or 2. For instance, the Cookeville, Tennessee tornado from last year on March 3rd, the EF4, that was in a level 1 out of 5 risk. Yep. It's like, what? And then you had Noonan, Georgia, earlier this year was an EF4. That happened in the slight risk. The high-risk zone, for instance, on March 25th, everything happened south of that. And despite the shape shift of the setup, fatalities remain limited, thankfully, still. To me, one death is always going to be too many, but it could have been way, way worse. Sure. March 25th. I was absolutely scared about that day. I'm thinking, this is a rare setup for violent tornadoes. No question about it. But again, though, looking back on this day is incredible. And you know what? I wanted to share real quick, too. Yeah. We sort of had, I wouldn't say a similar day to this, but in the environmental setup overall, it was a little bit similar. Back on June 25th earlier this year. And some people were throwing out the day, August 24th, being like, I'm getting a similar feeling to this. I'm thinking, nothing's going to happen. There's so much cloud cover and whatnot. On June 25th is a low-end risk, and then the sunshine came out actually at like 6 o'clock at the end of my shift. So it actually told me to go home. We were thinking I can go home. I was watching some of at that point, I was watching the Olympic trials. I'm into that stuff. I was watching it, ate a salad, I was eating dinner, I was enjoying my night. Severe thunderstorm watch got issued. I'm thinking, okay, I'm a little surprised, but it is what it is. And then tornadoes start happening near Carrollton. I'm like, oh. And I remember you called me, Marcus, and I was thinking to myself, I should get back there, shouldn't I wish? And you had called me, and I got myself there immediately. Yeah. And, I was able to get there in time and help her out. But, yeah, I've had to cover some significant stuff already myself. I just want to quickly share this experience, too, for you guys, because it's like, since we're talking about crazy outbreaks and stuff like that, I know, of course, it's unrelated to August 24th, but since we're on the topic of all this, I made my legitimate on-air debut on June 18th. Yeah, you did. Look at you. Yeah. I'm so proud of how I was able to step up that day. You talk about stuff right on cue, Marcus. We were about to start All Indiana. Right. Right at 4 o'clock, and we had the tornado warning issue for Northeast Jay County. Right at 4 o'clock, I'm looking down at my phone, and I looked at the computer. It said, tornado warning got issued into Ohio, so they also extended a warning into Ohio for the storm going into there, because it was already, the rotation wasn't too far from the state line. Right. back down on my phone, there is a huge blue square. I thought, oh, God, this is not good. And, of course, at this point, I'm looking real far up into the storm. The radar's aloft. The Earth curves, so the radar's aloft.
Right.
And I was looking you're looking probably about a good 5,000 feet, pretty much a mile up into the storm. But looking at that debris signature, I thought, we got a strong tornado going on probably right now. So I immediately went to Ashley. And from there, we went, I wouldn't say nonstop. We pretty much had intermittent severe weather coverage over the next several hours. But, yeah, just being a part of the process of course, getting that information now, being Ashley's radar guide and looking for NWS chat, being a part of the process and getting my experience in as well is already shaping me up a bit in my early stages of my career. And I want you guys to understand, I'm early in my career. I just started this business back in March last year. And
he still has his hair, so obviously he's early on in his career.
I wanted to mention that too. Oh my goodness. I found a Facebook Live video, guys, of this stuff with you guys as well, Which TV Severe Weather coverage. Someone went Facebook Live and they were pretty much, it was like the behind the scenes stuff of August 24th, 5 years ago.
Oh,
and I'm like,
yeah. That would have been... that would have been Jeff Wagner, I think. Jeff Wagner is a former reporter here. He's in Minneapolis, Minnesota now. But I remember him going Facebook Live, and so I'm having to like talk on TV and talk on Facebook and all this other craziness. But yeah, I do remember.
Well, it's like, yeah. The first thing, I'm sorry, I had to say that. The first thing I was like, Marcus with hair.
I did have hair. Yeah,
yes,
that's right.
You had hair.
That was, I think that was the year that I did shave my head. It was, I think, in October later that year. So my hair was on the last hurrah. But, yeah, but I did have hair. If you looked at some of that video, I think I ended up going on Weather Nation the next day. Because it was my day off, so much for an easy Friday, right? When I was sitting there bragging, oh, yeah, easy Friday. No, it was not. I don't think I got home until about 1 o'clock in the morning. Because I was helping Ebony kind of tie in some loose ends and, finish some web stuff and all that other stuff that we'd obviously not been able to attend to since we had been on the air for 8 hours straight.
Yeah.
But... I remember going home. I got a phone call. I have a former coworker of mine from Peoria that's at Weather Nation. Those of you that are not familiar with Weather Nation, it's basically a competitor to the Weather Channel. They're a 24-hour weather network based out of Denver, just outside of Denver. So I had to do a Skype interview with them. I ended up doing another interview with somebody else too, and I can't remember where. Because that ended up being like a huge national story because I think everybody in the country saw the image of that Starbucks that I think originated with Connor Daly. And now obviously other people went out there. But it was just like it ended up being a huge national story because on a day that was supposed to be quiet pretty much across the nation, it ended up being quite active. And we were the center of the weather universe, at least for about 8 hours on that day, which nobody would have predicted if you would have told me that morning. But
right.
So it was. Before we wrap things up, Stephen, I got a question for you.
Okay.
Which are you more surprised at? Considering that, we're entering probably the hottest week so far of this summer in terms of consecutive days. Are you more surprised that it has been, let's do quick math here, 9 years since the last time that we've actually hit 100 degrees in Indianapolis, or 5 years that we've actually had a significant tornado outbreak in central Indiana? Which is more surprising to you?
You know what? That's a good question, but you know what? I actually am going to have to go with significant tornado outbreak because, yeah, we do get hot in the summer, but we rarely hit the 100-degree mark. We did it in 2011 too, but not as much as we did in 2012. And before that, I think it was in 88 we had 100-degree days. With the tornado stuff, though, I say the significant tornado outbreak because Indiana does have a fair share of intense tornado history. And I remember, of course, you were talking about, you had that podcast, Marcus, of like June can get crazy, where we've had quite a bit of notable events, like June 2nd, 1990, June 16th, 17th, 1992. Just the tornado aspect is what surprises me more, because I expect something to go down every couple of years, like whether it be a major severe storm threat like April Wave 2020 or Memorial Day 2019. Memorial Day 2019 was nuts.
Right.
That one, the crazy thing with that one, Marcus, is that me and my friends were like, there's a warm front, it was an enhanced risk, but like there's a warm front kind of camping now, it's cloudy, we're not sure what the cloudy skies bringing it. It didn't matter, it all went off, and then you have an EF4 in Dayton. At that point, I'm just getting ready to blow a gasket watching it.
Right.
It's like, oh goodness, but it's like the lesson learned too is never underestimate Mother Nature. But yeah, what surprises me more is we haven't had a significant outbreak. And I will say, I'm just only curious, like how much longer is it going to be before we have something like this happen again? I mean, I feel it coming, honestly. I'm not going to lie. I feel something coming sooner rather than later. Yeah, we just had the massive hail, and we don't get hail that big either. My goodness, like what, 3 inches, 3+ inches on June 18th? And wow, that was incredible. Yep. The atmosphere was a gun-loaded scenario with the unstable air itself. But yeah, and of course, this is I want to mention too. Always make sure you have some sort of severe weather plan in place when you have a severe threat, because you never know when things are going to go off the rails. I want everyone to understand this. And of course, we don't want you to be scared about it. That's why one of the main reasons why, of course, you hear us in a more calm and collective tone. No one wants to hear someone freaking out about it. We want you guys to be safe, and we want you guys to be okay. We want to know you guys are okay and stuff, and get the information out to you guys on what's going on. And that's so important in the severe weather world overall. And of course, the public's important too, because of getting those reports, and also those people making phone calls to their relatives and friends saying, hey, you got something coming your way. I don't want to say it like this. We can only do so much on the TV inside of things to where like getting a message out. Right. I don't want to say it like that though. Then again, because it's like we can do a lot. But then again though, we're not the ones that can get you to shelter. That's on you. It's up to you to get to your safe place at that point. That's just how it goes. And of course, social science studies are tremendous, of course, especially after Super Outbreak 2011. But when the next severe tornado outbreak comes, Marcus, I will tell you this right now. I am going to be as ready as I can be for it. And being as young as I am in my career, of course, if it ends up happening like that, so be it. You got to be ready for anything. I remember you telling me, too, one thing you need to be, one of the biggest things in this business is being ready for anything. How are you going to handle adversity? Yep. Absolutely. And I learned well from you.
Well, and I think that day is a prime example of it. I don't want to get into the details, but Ebony was feeling a little bit under the weather that day. And so while she was outstanding, and she was like, her and I worked well together for that extended coverage, there were times she had to step aside because she was not feeling very well. And so that made the day difficult for her, made the day difficult for everybody. So because we're not taking breaks, we're trying to get the newsroom involved, because obviously we've got some major stories going on in Kokomo, in Crawfordsville. You did have a tornado that touched down in the city here. So you had some different angles that you could take that the newsroom could help you out. But like I said, you only are really able to take those breaks fully if you're not in full form tornado coverage, which unfortunately we really were for the vast majority of that coverage. There were a couple of times we were able to say, okay, news, you can take it. We've got a break in the action, but it was no more than maybe 15, 20 minutes. There would be another tornado warning that came out, and we were back off to the races and stuff. It was just, it was a weird day. And so that's where you have to, that was my point to you, I think. And I use this date as an example of how you have to be ready for just about anything and everything that gets thrown your way, because that was a day that I did not expect one, to be doing severe weather coverage, two, to be doing long form wall-to-wall severe weather coverage. I was ready for it. I think we handled it very well, but it was not a day that I was, I woke up in the morning and said, yep, this is going to be a day that we're going to be, we're going all out and wall-to-wall. And so it ended up working out well, but a lot of that is just because you have to stay prepared and all that other stuff. So I think we're going to put the wraps. We got to put the wraps up on this. We've been going for about an hour here, Stephen. But first of all, thank you for hanging out with me here. And if people want to reach out to you on social media, I don't think I've ever asked this before, and you've been on like 10 podcasts of mine. If they want to,
at this point,
if they want to hit you up on social media, where can they find you?
Yeah, hey, real quick though, you're welcome, Marcus, and thank you for having me on.
Yep.
Always a pleasure. I love doing this stuff with you, man. Talking about this great. Just reflecting back on history is incredible, especially with this kind of day. I remember an episode back in March. You asked me that question about where you can follow me, but it's been a minute, so if you guys, of course, haven't listened to the prior episodes, you can find me on social media. On Facebook, my weather page is Stephen. I have a V in my first name. Deanna, Diana, WX. That's my weather page on Facebook. Instagram is Stephen D_WX98. Somewhere along those lines is a picture of me running a red shirt. No, my profile picture is now. Yeah, that's right. My profile picture on Instagram and Twitter are now. Because they panned the camera to me once actually on June 18th, so I ended up grabbing a snapshot of that and fuel.
Nice. So he's a TV star. He'll sign autographs for you too.
Yeah, I'll sign your autograph.
20 bucks.
I will.
Don't do it. Hey, don't do it for free, Stephen. You do it for free, then you have to do it free for everybody.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Gotta listen to the wise Marcus Bailey.
Well, I don't know about that, but
he knows a thing or two.
I've got a few years around the block.
Hey, you guys do everything right there. Hey, what can I say? That's how I was able to grow exponentially with this stuff.
You keep having that attitude, and you tell us about how great you are. You're going to go far in life. I tell you what.
Absolutely, man. Hey, you guys have gone far in life too, and I just want to be like you guys and do my part and be a significant aspect of this community too. On Twitter, I changed my username recently. It's been a long time coming for that. I don't know why I haven't, but it's Stephen Deanna WX, no space. So that's where you can find me on social media. Again, though, it was great being on this podcast, Marcus, and down the road, of course, I'll be on more as well for you guys. And, of course, like Marcus says at the end of this podcast, I'll have him out with this one. If you guys got any ideas for podcast episodes, be sure to email Marcus at marcus.bailey@wishtv.com. He will gladly accept anything. We love talking this stuff, and of course Marcus does too. Yeah. But hey,
I'm always up for
great chatting with you.
I'm always up for new ideas, like talking about the wet bulb temperature or
that was interesting.
I thought so too. I thought it was fun. Here through the Olympics, I'm like whatever. So
yeah, absolutely, quite an interesting topic with the community in Japan as well.
All right. Well, Stephen and I will dissect some other nerdy weather stuff that won't put you to sleep, and we'll try to put it out in future podcast episodes. All right, Stephen. Thanks, man. We'll have your forecast for the last week of August. That's coming up next year on Weather Weekly. All right, here's a look at the forecast for the week of August 23rd. Probably one of the hotter weeks that we've had so far this summer. Several days of 90-degree heat, and really headlined probably by the hottest day, I think, which will be Wednesday, depending on how much shower and thunderstorm activity we can get going on here. I've got a high of 95 on Wednesday, but I think we easily will hang in the low 90s for Thursday and Friday. Heat indices are going to be between 100 and 105, so we could have several days in a row here of heat advisories, rather. And we could be pretty toasty heading into the weekend as well. I'm not quite up to 90 in my 8-day forecast, but we're oh so close. I think I have 89 on Saturday, 88 on Sunday. So we will be very close to 90 degrees. And so we could be seeing several days here. We've already picked up, as I'm recording this, 3 days. This Tuesday that I'm recording could potentially be the fourth day in a row of 90-degree heat. Wednesday would be 5. We could get 6 on Thursday, 7 on Friday, 8, 9, possibly 10, although I have us into the mid-80s by Monday. And there is some signs that we'll get some cooler air coming in by next week. The 31st is on Tuesday, and maybe a slightly more comfortable start to the month of September. But the 6 to 10 day outlook says a pretty high probability of above average temperatures and above average precip, and not much better here for the 8 to 14 day outlook, which is also calling for a pretty high probability of above average temperatures and about normal precipitation as we start rolling through. This would take us into the into the first week of September. So not much of a cool down as we open up the month of September and kind of the unofficial end to our summer season. That's a look at the forecast here as we gear up for the last week of August. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here on episode number 28. Hopefully you enjoyed it, kind of looking back 5 years ago on this week here, looking at that tornado outbreak. It's been a while since we've had anything significant, but always stay on guard, as we say, because things can change in a hurry. It certainly did that day, as you heard from our accounts there, what happened 5 years ago. What would you like to hear here on the podcast? Please let us know. You can email me anytime, marcus.bailey@wishtv.com. You can also find me on social media at Marcus Bailey Weather on Facebook and at Marcus Bailey, all one word, on Facebook and the Instagram. The Insta, as the kids say. We'd love to have your suggestions, and we've got hopefully some good plans coming down the pipe for you as we start gearing up for the fall season and heading into winter, which we'll see if that'll be busy or not. Hope to have you join us next week here for an all-new episode of Weather Weekly. It'll be episode number 29. While you're here, we'd love to have you check out all the other great podcasts we have going on here at Wish TV and the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Discover more from Storm Track 8 Weather and Wish TV. Online at wishtv.com, and when you follow Wish TV on Facebook. Plus, be sure to check out more great podcasts from the All Indiana Podcast Network now at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.